If you ever come home crying, you better sit on the street, he said, and then walk in the house. He said, because you fight the bully, he's going to beat you up, but he will never fight you again because he wants to fight a guy that's going to fight back. And I told it to my kids, they'll tell you.
This is going to hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast. I don't think there's a single human being on the planet that doesn't think they know what worry is. You deal with trials and tribulations of life in the best way you know how, feeling that you are always prepared for any suffering that is thrown your way. A beautiful child enters the world that you are proud to call your own. Now you understand what real worry is. The overwhelming responsibility to care for another life that you love more than yourself. What makes a human being impervious and invulnerable to pain is if there's nothing in the world they care for. When your child enters your arms, there is a vulnerability. Until that child is ready to make their way in the world, and even after, they are forever on your mind as your responsibility. I'm Kevin Donaldson here with Mike Failace, and on this episode of the Suffering Podcast, we welcome a very, very special guest, Mr. Frank Failace, to discuss the suffering of a father. I am a pilgrim in an unholy land in this studio right now.
Are.
I am surrounded by Failaces.
Listen, and you're the only Eagle fan in here. So we'll keep it at that.
They better win Super Bowl.
Oh, if they don't win the Super Bowl, I am in deep poo-poo.
Yeah, and so is my inheritancy of
because I've put out so much trash. By the time this airs, obviously the Eagles will be Super Bowl champions, but I put out so much trash that I am going to get my balls busted.
Well, I don't do that. Mine goes money-wise.
If they don't, Jalen Hurts, this is a message to you. If you don't, you're going to get a knock on your door by Mr. Frank Failace saying, where's my money?
Yeah, what happened?
You just, F you, pay me.
What do we talk about?
Before we get into anything, let's throw a shout out to one of our marquee sponsors. That's 3 Acres Luxury Condominiums, 400 Claremont Avenue in Jersey City. Go to 3acresjc.com to take a look at all the amenities. They really have everything there that you need. You never have to leave the establishment. Mike and I have been very fortunate to be welcomed into their family, and we couldn't be happier. So go to 3acresjc.com. Check out everything they have. Now, Mr. Failace, thank you so much for coming in. The reason we're having you in is because during our second anniversary Grand Saloon event, you were the shining star.
He was the star of the show.
You were the shining star.
We got the most comments probably just off of him on that show.
100%. And you shined. People just wanted to listen to you. I know.
No, I appreciate it, but that's me. What can I say?
Well, that's what the whole thing, that's what all the comments were. He just seemed so real and down to earth.
No, you weren't. There was no rehearsing. You didn't have to beautify yourself. You were just you.
Well, you said to me, let's get your father on. I went, Dad, come on, we want to get you on. What am I going to talk about?
And, of course, in studio, our special guest co-host, Frank Failace Jr.
That's what I said to Michael. I says, Frankie, I want the 3 of us on.
Yeah.
I told him that.
Absolutely. This is going to be something that's going to last forever.
This before I knew, I don't want Frankie on.
Oh,
thank God he didn't have any more kids. We wouldn't have enough room in the studio.
This way, if I want to smack him, I'm going to smack him before everybody sees him.
Well, I'll tell you what.
Hey, Dad, where are your only kids? Are there any other kids going to be showing up here saying, wait, me too? Me too?
That you don't have to worry about, believe me.
So if you just give me the eye. You get him, I get him.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go together.
We're trapped in a corner, Frank. You're it's a long way out of here.
By the time he moves, I can even get out.
Andrew will have to come in and pull him out of his chair.
Frank is trapped in the drunken corner.
That's right.
So listen, big shout out. Frank's been so good to us. He's been with us from the beginning. Go to Drunken Corner on Instagram, check him out. He does a lot of stuff on there. You're really going to enjoy it. A lot of Instagram lives, which we've been on a couple times. It was a lot of fun. So, Mr. Failace, one of the things that we do, and I'm going to call you Mr. Failace, and I don't care what you say. You've earned the respect. That's what's going to happen. We've had this discussion before. So you're Mr. Failace to me. You will forever be Mr. Failace.
Just call him Senior.
Senior. Yeah, there you go.
Senior.
All right, is Senior more palatable than Mr. Failace?
Yeah, Mr. Failace is my father.
I say that too all the time. Mr. Failace is my father.
I mean, you appreciate it. I have his friends. I'm very good friends with his friends. The one thing kids running for mayor, and I says, Phil, he said, you'll always be Mr. Failace.
It's how I was brought up, in all honesty. You know, I teach my kids that too. This is, Mr. Failace. This is, or I'll say Mr. Mike, or it's Mr. Santiago, or it's Mr. Failace. That's just how I teach my kids because that's the way I was brought up. It's a sign of respect.
You know, it's funny, when I grew up, the people next door to me were by their first name. People lived down the street, they were Mr. and Mrs. I don't know why.
Yeah,
I really.
Well, close-knit families, you can go by first name.
Yeah, it's kind of like uncle. That's not Mister. But before we go any further, we take a question every week from one of our audience members, and we kind of put it out there to the guests. This week comes from Pete124, Pete_124. What's your fondest childhood memory? Mr. Failace, you're our guest today, or senior. Senior. I'm going to hand this one off to you.
Well, really, I had many, but my father was a sports fan. My father was born in Italy. You never know it. He had no accent. But we always went to ball games, and I lived 10 minutes away from Roosevelt Stadium. I saw, with my father, Jackie Robinson play in Roosevelt Stadium.
Was it pro or within the Negro Leagues?
It was in the International League.
Oh, really?
Yep.
So
I was with my father. I tell people, I said I was with my father. My father would take me down there, and it was like, at that time it wasn't anything big. I said, oh, that's how good he was, though.
So that's my question to you. You saw him play firsthand, and I know he was good. But in the Negro Leagues, there were people who were arguably better. Josh Gibson, Satchel Paige.
They kept him because they knew he had the mentality not to fight back. Because they knew once you fought back, you licked.
And he had the drawing power, too. He had a name.
So he wasn't the best, like you said, but when he played, he had the wherewithal not to fight back, just take it. I mean, he used to spit at him. They did.
Yeah, they really did some bad stuff. If you watch that, what was it, the documentary or the movie they made about
the 42?
42, that's what it was.
That's the number.
I had a brief conversation with Willie Mays because I think he was the third player to come up from the Negro Leagues.
Well, I know the first guy the other guy after him was from Patterson.
Larry Doby.
Oh, good memory, yeah. So
they were going to bring Doby up, but they didn't think that Doby could stand it as much as Jackie Robinson.
The enormous amount of pressure that they had to be under was
people,
crazy.
Really don't realize. And you know what hurts? I could honestly say I never grew up prejudiced. I didn't know the black guy was just not. I don't understand. Even today, I still say, "Oh, how could it be like this?"
Yeah, well, I think today it might be even a little bit.
Well,
worse.
I mean, we've said this before too. I think racism is a learned behavior.
Absolutely.
Because and my father didn't have a racist bone in his body, and that's why. I mean, me and my brother, I don't think we ever met black people till we went to high school.
Yep.
So we had no preconceived notions about them. They're just regular people.
That's why I really don't understand it.
Yeah. It's
when
a
I was in
crazy
high
thing.
school, my friend's mom would make breakfast for the black, white. You didn't say, "How come you bring the black guy?" I mean, it's like crazy. I can't believe it.
It's such a foreign concept to us. Now, Frank Jr., what do you think your fondest childhood memory is? It better be about your father because he's sitting next to you and he's within hitting distance.
It's got to be having me as a brother. I mean, come on.
That's a tough battle I got between the two of you. I'd probably have to say, and I'm sure he'll remember, is that when we were growing up, obviously sports, everything revolved around sports. Notre Dame, Yankees, Giants, everything, no matter what it was. And I wasn't young at this time. I was a little older, but my father always said there's two things he wants to do in his whole life. He wants to go see Notre Dame play USC at Notre Dame, and he wants to go to Giants Super Bowl and see the Giants win the Super Bowl. So I got lucky enough to get tickets and took him to Notre Dame USC when Jerome Bettis was the running back and Lou Holtz was the coach. So we went out there for a weekend and saw Notre Dame play USC. And then my brother and I had the pleasure of going to the Giants-Broncos Super Bowl and sitting with my father and watching him cry when the Giants won the Super Bowl, and we were there with him.
Was that the one where Mike Adams said he was going to walk home to Patterson?
No, that was the Giant Stadium Super Bowl. That was Seahawks and the Broncos,
Because I know Mike Adams, and I said, "Were you really going to?" He goes, "Nah, it was too far. I wasn't going to walk." But we lost anyway, so it was no big deal. So, Mike, what do you think? What's your fondest childhood memory?
you know, growing up, and not just because he's sitting here today, but I mean, Frank, you could attest to this. We had the greatest parents ever. You know, we really did. We didn't want for anything. We didn't need for anything. To pigeonhole a greatest childhood memory, I think that would be impossible. All the Super Bowls we went to. I mean, we went to Super Bowl 20. We went to Super Bowl 10. I was 9 years old. My father took me and my brother.
They rooted for the team that won. I bet the team that lost. I couldn't say nothing to them. I didn't want to root it. It's the truth. They're jumping up and
Super
down.
Bowl 10, it was the Steelers and Cowboys down in Miami. That's with the Lynn Swan catch.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, we were at that
Swan,
game.
right.
That's pretty cool.
Like I said, my father afforded us a lot of great memories.
But you got to understand something, Mike. As great a memory as that was for you, I'm sure that was equally as great a memory for you.
I love being with them. I really did.
He took. See, my parents were divorced when I was probably about 7 years old or so. My father took me and my brother to California on a 2-week trip. We went to Vegas. We went to San Diego. We went to Los Angeles.
Topless burlesque show.
We went to a burlesque. He took us to a burlesque
9
show.
and 7 years old.
We go to the place
Failace Sr.
Kids, that's where milk comes from.
in Vegas where they get the $1 million outside.
Mm-hmm.
So we go see it. So I says, "Do you want to go inside? You got to be 21." I said, "Just come with me. Don't say a word. Just keep walking." We're walking. Hear a guy yelling behind me. I just keep walking. We get into the thing. The guy comes up. I says, "What did I do? You can't bring people." I said, "I didn't know that." I said, "All right, we went out." But I brought him into the
Binions. To take them in Binions, that's another
$1 million
history.
horseshoe.
That's what it was, Binions.
Binions, yeah.
They had the $1 million.
Yeah.
But I think my fondest childhood memory, and Frank, and I know you could attest to that, is when we played little kids football. You know, North Arlington Leaders football. Now, they're the junior Vikings now, but my father was our coach.
Yeah.
You know, and we had so much fun playing back in the day. I mean, that was a real special time.
That's a great thing, being able to coach your kids, because you see them develop, you see them learn, you see them grasp something that's a love of yours, and that's what I get out of coaching.
Oh, yeah.
So for me, you know, obviously I'm the odd man out in this room. But my grandfather and I had a very special relationship. You know, he lived with us for a short time, and I remember the bathroom, we had like a little efficiency apartment in our house, which they lived in, and the bathroom was leaking at the bottom. We put a sponge around it, and every once in a while you got to wring the sponge out. But him and I were hell-bent on fixing this thing. It was one summer. I think I was probably in about 7th grade, and he was an older guy. He couldn't get behind the toilet, so I'm behind the toilet, and we couldn't figure out what it was. We spent 3 weeks trying to fix a toilet. Here's what it did. It got me to spend time with my grandfather. It taught me plumbing. I know everything there is to know about replacing a toilet and the inner workings of a toilet. And it was something simple, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. As frustrating as it was at times, I look back on that as one of my fondest memories. I learned so much. I got to spend it with my hero. And those are memories that you can't buy, you know? So, Pete, thank you so much for sending that question in. Keep sending in your questions, and we will get them on the air. So, Senior, I'm going to have to get used to saying that one. I know a lot about you. I've been involved in your family in one form or another for 25 plus years, so I've heard so much about you. Why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, how you grew up?
Oh, well, I was Jersey City my whole life. I moved to North Arlington. When I got divorced, where'd I go? Back to Jersey City again. I love high school so much, it took me 4.5 years to get out. My mother said to me, "You got to graduate. You're embarrassing your father." I didn't want it because I knew I had to go to work. I knew I wasn't going to college. I'm not a college guy. And that was it. But I enjoyed high school just for the fun of it, not for...
Was it the people you were around? Was it your friends? Or was
See, in Jersey City, when you hang out with all sports guys. You didn't hang out with the guys with the books. Not that you thought, but you hang out with all sports guys, even from other high schools. I knew people from we play Snyder, as a matter of fact. You make a tackle, let's say, "Frank, there's a party at Johnny's house today." You're playing a team. And you went to the party, and that's how it was.
He didn't want to leave high school. He was making too much money when he was in high school.
But that's how Jersey City was.
You notice he didn't say no.
Yeah, exactly. He moved on right to the next one.
But
were you? So what kind of kid were you? Were you a knockaround kid, sports kid?
yeah, well, I'll put it this way. They called me Frankie Butch. So I thought I got the nickname because my grandfather was a butcher. So I asked my mother one day, Ma, how did I get the nickname Frankie Butch? Because I used to call him Pop. Because Poppy said it? He says, no, your Uncle Frankie gave it to you. I said, well, what? Because I used to sit in front of the thing. Could you beat that kid up? Nah. Well, let me see. I fight the kid for no reason at all. No, none at all. I have to fight the kid. And that's it. And he gave me the name Frankie
Sounds
Butch.
familiar.
Well, the worst thing you can ever do for your parents is to come home and say you lost the fight.
Oh, no, my father, you talk to my father, I tell these to my kids. My father would say, and my father was the nicest, they'll tell you, nice. If the ceiling fell down, you would say, well, step over.
Yeah, exactly.
Really.
He didn't care about anything.
But if he said, if you ever come home crying, you better sit on the street, he said, and then walk in the house. He said, because you fight the bully, he's going to beat you up, but he will never fight you again because he wants to fight a guy that's going to fight back. And I told it to my kids, they'll tell you, I don't care if you get beat up. You better fight him again because he won't bother you no more. And they never did that. That's what a bully is. He don't want to bother a guy that's going to fight back. He wants to bother a milquetoast guy that he could just keep beating up.
This is 100% truth. The best thing to cure bullying is a good punch in the nose.
I'm telling you, my
Get that
father.
right.
That's my father was.
Yeah. Mike Tyson said that, right? You know,
Everybody's a tough guy till they get punched in the mouth.
Yeah.
But my father was, my mother would say to me, my mom's maiden name was Bedino. She said, you're a Failace name only. I was just, my father, when I worked with my father, he said, I can't believe that's your father. Yeah, my father was just really the nicest guy in the world.
My grandfather would get along with everybody. Lived in Jersey City their whole lives.
Yep.
He would walk all over the place.
Feeding ducks.
But you were,
feeding
you
ducks.
guys saw a grandfather. Like I've heard stories about my grandfather as well, but you guys saw a grandfather, and I'm sure before you were born, you did. The apple usually doesn't fall far from the tree. I guarantee there were some moments.
Well, I had I tell you, my mom's father, he was a Bedino. He was a big shot in Jersey City. He was right under Hague. If you remember Hague was my grandfather had a Packard in them days. He had a Packard. He used to hang out with the car. It was like having a Rolls Royce today. Mm-hmm. He would hang out with a guy down the street. His guy's name was Joe Calford, who was a councilman. My mother and father lived next to one. That's how you live next to you, married him. So she would come to my mother and say, have Frankie dressed tomorrow. I want to take him with me. I used to go with him. I knew we had speakeasies, but my mother would never really talk with him. And I was the firstborn male. And he would say to my mother all the time, I love him dearly, but it's not doing me any good. But that's how, but he took me all over.
Well, there was one name that keeps popping up, and I want a little clarification on it. What is Tony the Horse?
Oh, the horse. Oh, forget about it.
We did a little research.
Tony the horse. You big like yeah.
We tripped him up in the first 15 minutes.
He lived in Cherry Street over New York. I mean, he was like in murder, one of them type of guys. But he never. Now my grandmother's an American-born because my father's first mom died in Italy with her brother in the sports epidemics. My grandfather came. He married my grandmother. I said she was American-born, but she was he would come into the neighborhood, terrorize. He's not exaggerating. Terrorize the neighborhood. They would be afraid of him. They'd be jumping out of windows every time he came. He had a fight with a guy going home to get an axe. I'm serious. That's why when he said to the horse, but he would go up to the store. My grandfather had a samba there. He'd go up there. My grandmother would be hitting with a broom. She'd say, I told you don't come here when you're drunk. Whack. I said, I can't believe this. He's got peaked and my grandmother's beating him. and she would feed him.
Yeah, well, hey, that's sometimes it's that bully syndrome. Well, if he came in and terrorized the neighborhood, the one person, what's he going to do? Hit a woman?
No, but that's how I said. They say, I can't believe it. He's yelling at her. She's yelling at him, and he's hitting her with a wow.
And there was one other thing that kept popping up. What is the last football wedding?
That was Tony the Horses.
That was Tony the Horse?
Tony the Horses.
What is that about?
Anyway, you can. I can say.
You can say whatever you want.
I get so many stories. We got.
Well, that's what we have you in here for.
I got an invite.
Hey, Drew, we got another hour after this. We can
I
stay
got
all
invited
night.
to the wedding. Of course, of my grandpa. I mean, that's the only reason why. So my friend I hung out with, his name was Mike Shanley.
Monkey face.
Monkey
Me and my
face.
brother used to call
the
monkey
kids
face.
call monkey face. They had a monkey hanging on the window. So anyway, I ain't got no girl at the time, so I go with Mike. He had the car. We drove there. So we go up there. We go to the thing. It was in the old Knights of Columbus Hall. So we have it. Now, people, and they call football weddings. They used to get the sandwiches. Who wants the ham and cheese? They throw it over to you. So it's over. We'll let her leave. So Shanley would say, do you notice when they said to kiss the bride, everybody went to the bathroom? Nobody wanted. So he says to me, Frankie, you got to take the sandwiches. I said, Tony, what am I going to do with it? I said, take the sandwiches home with you. We get the sandwiches, put them in the car. We're going home. We're throwing them out this side of the window. That people are following us down the street. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. They're following. Who's going to... We make believe and we throw it out this one. They come up the other side. We got rid of like 100 sandwiches going home, throwing them out the window.
What high school did you go to in Jersey City?
Lincoln High School.
I had some people I knew back a little bit before your time that went to Dickerson.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That was a rival.
The Pirro brothers.
Yeah.
My father graduated high school class of 51, 52, and 53, I think.
So
I went to two alumni, two class reunions.
well, there's better food there.
No kid.
So your idea of growing up in this atmosphere, to a kid growing up in the 40s, right? All right. So I want to know what your idea of what growing up was. Like, what was a grown up to you?
Me growing up I had the best life in the world. Not just me. We had nothing. My mother and father didn't try to compete with the Joneses. I didn't get a car. My father didn't get a car until I was old enough. We didn't lock the door. I didn't get a key for my house until I went to high school.
Me and Frankie had the same thing growing up.
Yeah.
We never had a key to our apartment. It was just always open. And
My mother would put the key.
glass.
Half of our friends use that to their advantage. Too.
My mother would put the key under the mat. Everybody knew the key was there.
Right.
We come home, we pick the key. I mean, really, we hadn't. How could you complain when nobody's got anything? We weren't poor. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say that. We were, average, but we had. But you didn't know. You didn't know who was rich, who was. Because everybody in the neighborhood was the same way as you were.